Good morning. I hope you are well. Today is going to be an exciting day. Of course, it's the first rainy day in lockdown, which means we're indoors. So we need to find some new habits we can do indoors to keep us happy and keep us alert and keep us fit and healthy and well. And I've got just the man to help me with today's theme. That is the brilliant Tom Watson. He'll be joining me in a couple of minutes' time. Tom, previously the deputy leader of the Labour Party. He himself, like me, was overweight for many, many years. We're about the same age. We're both Aston Villa fans. We're both from Birmingham, although he's West Brom, which I don't know whether he'll say that's Birmingham or not. Outskirts for those that don't know. But Tom was type 2 diabetic, working so hard down in London for the Labour Party, massively overweight, decided to change, lost 8 stone, put his diabetes into reverse, and we'll probably touch on that today, but we're mainly going to talk about how do we create new habits during lockdown. If this is your first show with us, welcome. We've got several things that we're trying to do. We're trying to help you learn about health and well-being, and also we're trying to raise money for the Trussell Trust that run 1,250 food banks across the UK. Now, at the moment, more than ever, they need our help simply because several things. They're community centres where they would normally hand out the food parcels. Many have had to close because of obviously social distancing. So now they're having to deliver food to people's homes, which obviously needs cash. And that's where we come in together, you and us. We can donate to Just Giving, or we can make a text donation, because right now, more than ever, there are people going hungry in our country, and you and I, by just making a small donation, can make a huge, huge difference. If you donate, say, £8, my family will match that, £8, and then the tax man, as long as we're taxpayers, will add the tax back. So £8 eventually becomes £20. So it will make a huge, huge difference. Anything you could give would be greatly received by the Trussell Trust. And of course, what we're also trying to do is look at the positives as we come out of COVID, which we undoubtedly will at some stage. What positives can we draw? Will the world be a better place? Will the communities be stronger? Will we have slowed down global warming? But we have changed our attitude maybe to food. In fact, a good friend of both Tom and mine was on the BBC last night, Dr. Asim Malhotra, giving his view on how being overweight is really, really something that you need to change, especially when there's things like COVID around, because every day you can get on that sort of trip in the sense of reducing your weight, on that journey of reducing your weight, helps defend and build your defense against COVID and the severity of COVID should you get it. Anyway, let's get off that. Let's get back to today's topic, changing habits. Absolutely delighted to have Tom Watson on the phone. How are you this morning, Tom?
Very good, thanks, Steve. How are you?
Yeah, mate, you look like you're in a recording studio.
It's actually a bit of a hack. I'm actually in the front room of the house, but I've got a borrowed information board and a microphone for recording. It's not that sophisticated.
So tell people about your journey. We'll get the subject is changing habits during lockdown, but talk about, because obviously you must have changed your habits in terms of what you were eating and exercise and so on, because you lost 8 stone in quite a quick period. Tell us about your journey, because I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone's journey is personal, but in many senses, my story fits millions of people who are in the same category. I put on the pounds over 30 years, a couple of pounds a year here and there, half a stone in 1 year, and hit my mid-50s, where I developed all the signs of metabolic syndrome. My blood pressure had steadily gone up. I became obese. I became pre-diabetic. I became type 2 diabetic. And like a lot of middle-aged guys, I was in denial about it. I was busy. We had a young family. I was working hard. I had a high-pressure job. Every day there were excuses as to why I should not only address the condition, but actually deny that I had any problems. And then in my early 50s, the quiet little voice became a cacophony. It said, I want to live. I want to live for my kids. And that's really when the world of nutrition, science, and fitness opened up for me. I began to read a lot more of the research around the condition I had, diabetes. I realized that, more about insulin resistance. And to get to the conclusion, I decided to divide public health advice, and I went low carb, having read books by people like Dr. Asim Malhotra or Michael Mosley or Jeff Volek and Dr. Finney in the States, and reversed my type 2. And so the story of the book is really how I put the weight on and how I felt about it, but really what methodology did I use to address the condition. And actually now, some of those techniques that I put in to make sure that I stay healthy, I stay active, I stay, in nutritional balance. And that's what the book's about. And actually in these lockdown months, what's been gratifying is there are a lot of people who've been reading the book, and they obviously get in touch. They can track you down on social media. So I'm spending a lot of my lockdown hours sharing recipes, giving advice, praising people, giving tips when they fall off the wagon, being supported myself by a group of new friends that are on similar journeys with similar challenges.
What I loved about your book, and I've read something like 400 books on my own journey, and your book and another one called Fixing Dad, which is another great book. But your two books are different to all the rest, and I think it will resonate with so many people, is that it is a story. You haven't gone too far into the science. I tend to get bogged down with numbers and stats and graphs and all that. You've kind of stayed away from the science. You've just, from the heart, told your story about the weight gain, and then the realization, and then how you got it off in the most honest and open way I've ever read, and I applaud you for it. I think it's one of the nicest books I've ever read.
Thank you for that. I mean, for me, that was very deliberate as well, because obviously until very recently I was in public service as an MP, and you could argue that I'd spent the last 25 years telling people what to do as a politician. And I was determined in this book not to tell people what to do. I was really clear about it. I just needed to say what I did to get well, and to give people a bit of hope that if they can map out their own plan, their lives can be transformed. In the middle years, I'm as happier as I've ever been. Life is a joy. And it takes a little bit of work to get there, but it's worth it. And I wanted people to feel that they could do that. And the only way I could get that over was by being candid about the sort of dark moments and the moments of insecurity and stress and worry and regret and remorse. And I tried to put that in the pages as well.
No, it's absolutely brilliant, and I highlighted quite a lot of one-liners in here that I thought was brilliant. And in fact, one's perfect for today. You said, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act but a habit," which is something I think we're going to come on to in a moment. I also liked the the line where you said, those that are sort of in this area of health and wellness, we're swimming against the tide of standard nutritional guidelines. Isn't it sad that we still have these crazy guidelines at the moment?
Yeah, the guidelines, and you really don't realise this until you defy them, until you start feeling better when you're breaking the rules. What actually happened for me, when you move to a low carb, sort of medium protein, higher fat diet, even now, when you have that little bit of extra cheese or an extra egg in your omelette, or a little bit of butter in your coffee, it's almost like subliminally embedded in us that is in some way an act of an immoral act, that you're not supposed to have that much fat in your diet, and you're almost drenched in personal guilt when you first start it. You need to deprogram yourself, because for me, and it's when you realise how all pervasive the marketing of food products has been in your life, and how some of the public health advice is so embedded that it really does affect the choices you make, even when you've consciously decided that that's the route you want to go down. So there's still a little bit of guilt even when you're being purposeful, and that's one of the things I try to get over in the book. If you're going to do it, you've got to do it your way, and you've got to do it with commitment.
Yeah, but also because everybody's telling you that's wrong, you shouldn't go low carb. I mean, I'm on a 4-day, hopefully 5-day fast at the moment, and just been doing my ketones this morning. I'm quite happy with that, and I've got bags of energy, even though I haven't eaten now for 36 hours. You still get everybody go, well, that's crazy, because and the people say, well, that's crazy because of all those things we've been taught as we were growing up. Eat little but often. You must have 3 meals a day, and in your case, you must have a balanced diet. And it's like, well, hang on, a balanced diet got me where we got to.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, with fasting, I mean, of course, what you realise with fasting, I mean, the first time I did a day fast, I remember thinking, oh, my blood sugar's going to crash. Am I going to faint? Everyone tells me this is really bad for me. And, obviously you have to play through what are really just tiny little hunger pangs. It's not starvation, that's style ravenous hunger. But I remember waking up the next day after a 24-hour fast. I literally felt $1 million. I felt fantastic, like in tune with my body, like I'd got more energy. And then, of course, you read the work of people like Dr. Jason Fung and others. And, of course, they explain that over thousands of years, nearly every major religion has some form of fasting as part of their ceremonies. Christians will fast on Good Friday. Obviously, we're now in the holy month of Ramadan, where people take day fasts, and millions of people around the world. And, whereas before you'd be worried about your friend's health when they were on a fast, now you just think, isn't that fantastic that they're having the joy of fasting?
Yeah, and I keep saying to people, what you have to do is what you've done, which is you've got to go low carb first, because I've had friends that have tried to fast when they're still a sugar burning machine, so their body, they get hangry, and they last for a few hours, and then they go, I can't do this, it's horrible, and therefore they don't try it again. I say to everybody watching right now, is that first of all, learn to cut down the carbs, so then you turn into a fat burning machine. And when you do that, it's just like turning off the switch for incoming food and dialing up the switch for burning your own body fat. And I was there this morning, I was in the gym, and I felt absolutely fantastic. I got up in the middle of the night because my 4-year-old woke up. Typically did it the day I was on a fast, and those little hungry pangs were just there at 4 o'clock this morning, but I just ignored them and they went away. And when I woke up at 6 o'clock, perfect, no problem.
Yeah, it's a great feeling. And when you try and explain this to your friends, though, who've not done the reading, or are in a slightly different place, and you talk about that idea of becoming fat adapted. We're both from the Midlands. I always try and describe it. It's like having a 2-tank Jaguar that you could just switch to another source of energy very quickly, but it takes a bit of time to get the engine tuned to do that. And it's quite a hard description to give people who've not done the science. But it is like that, isn't it? When you kind of know when you're in nutritional ketosis, and you just feel a little bit more alert.
Of course, what's helping me at the moment, of course, is our beloved football shut. And that one thing that I will have 2 cheats I do, because I do occasionally miss the carbs. So my 2 cheats, number 1, Aston Villa football ground, curry pasty. I still like my curry pasty. Yeah. And at the airport, if it's an early morning flight, I still like the ham and mustard and cheese toasty. But other than those 2, I do not touch carbs.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of, I mean, the trouble is I'm now in a household where there's obsessive food making. And some really amazing sourdough bread is coming out of our oven at the moment. And I've only got to smell bread and I put on 6 pounds. But I have veered off the path a couple of times, and literally for the first time in 3 years, to have beautifully buttered, freshly homemade, warm bread. But even then, I've regretted it afterwards. So now, I'm avoiding it again. But it was a little bit of a diversion.
Yeah, well, my 5-day fast now is simply because I fell off the wagon a lot the last 2 weeks. 5 kids at home watching. I mean, they're all pretty good. I mean, Jack, who's driving the show this morning, my 18-year-old, every morning has his bacon, he has his eggs, and then he follows it up with some berries. So there's good food in the house, but there's also some not so good food in the house. So it became a bit too easy to fall off the wagon in the last couple of weeks, and hence I am making myself do this 5-day fast, and I'm telling everybody I'm doing it so I don't fall off the wagon.
Yeah. Well, but the accountability thing's important as well, isn't it? If you've got a friends network that sort of get you through it, and it is hard when people are at home. I mean, you can't see this on screen now, but I'm literally about 15 feet away from the fridge door in our house, and I find myself even now, and I consider myself quite disciplined. The amount of times I open the fridge door and think, why have I just done this? Because of an ingrained 30-year habit for me was literally just opening the fridge. There's a bit in the book, I'm not sure if it got through to the final edit, but a very close family member said their abiding memory of me was walking into the house holding a mobile phone to my ear, hearing me talk on the phone, and then the next thing is hearing the squeak of the fridge door as I subconsciously ate and just worked my way from the top of the fridge down to the bottom, and literally whatever was there I could put in my hand, I would eat. And that was a negatively ingrained habit developed over years that just would have had thousands of calories cumulatively over the years that I managed to consciously break. But even now, it's still lingering away there that can be triggered at any point.
Yeah, and you say beautifully in the book, if you take one can of, I think you said cola rather than Coke, but I think one can of cola, it would take you a 5-mile run just to burn off those, excessive calories. And I think that's what a lot of people just don't realise.
I mean, how many times have you gone to the gym? You've done what you think's a great workout. You probably do like 40 minutes, an hour on the runner, maybe do half a dozen weights, even do a class, and then you sit down in the cafe afterwards and get a can of pop. You've wasted all that energy. And these days, I mean, that is one thing I never touch. And we've discussed this before, but I mean, there is a sort of fierce debate over what good nutritional guidance is on many continents now. But the one thing that unites everyone in this space is there's too much refined sugar in our lives. And actually, the work of Dr. Malhotra and others, we're seeing this with COVID now, that, where there's emerging data that suggests that, metabolic resilience, is going to get more people through COVID than others. And the relationship between the people that are very poorly and metabolic syndrome and obesity is now pretty categoric, I think. And that's going to give us some lessons for public health policy when we come out of these crisis months about how do we get the nation to be more healthy.
Yeah, I mean, if you just think back to prior to you losing the weight down, in Westminster with the size you were, and at the same time I was obese at that period, if it had come knocking on our door, we would have dealt with it in a very different way than we probably would today, and probably would have been a lot more severe.
Yeah, it's not an understatement to say that I think I've dodged a bullet. I feel utterly blessed, almost guided in these current months, because if I'd have been 22 stone, I'd almost definitely have got the virus in Westminster. It was a sort of hotspot area. Even our Prime Minister has been very, very poorly. And it would have been, I would have been in that high range, I mean, guy overweight, obese, diabetes, high blood pressure in my 50s. Those are probabilities I wouldn't want to have risked. And, now out of London, 8 stone lighter, much calmer, better state of equilibrium, growing vegetables. Okay, I might be cooking a bit more bread, but it's a totally different lifestyle, and I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah, but you might be cooking a lot more bread, but I bet you're not having that much of it.
I'm definitely not cooking cakes, that's for sure.
So you talked about changing habits. So your life's gone from full on in London, day after day, travelling down from the Midlands, high stress, overweight. All the symptoms you could have had to, not staying on this planet for much longer. And exactly, and your motivation and mine were exactly the same. Young children, how do we stay around to be around for them for as long as possible? What was it? How did you break that habit of just reaching for the can of Coke and the takeaways? How did you first break that habit?
I think the first thing to say on this is you can't just do it overnight. I mean, you can do it fairly quickly, but you can't just do it. You need to sort of, first of all, I think you need to sort of be very conscious of what negative, really sort of audit and assess where your little transgressions come from. It's the little transgressions that cumulatively create a massive problem. And so for me, it was things like, what time do I wake up in the morning? Have I got time to prepare a decent, nutritious meal in the morning rather than eat on the run? But I mean, it's not been unheard of for me to be collected in the car and I was eating a bowl of sugary cornflakes actually in the car on the way to a meeting because I was in such a hurry. So I had to assess everything in my unhealthy life, and then address those issues one by one. The low hanging fruit is the easy stuff. So, what did my weekly shopping basket look like? I never left a supermarket without a packet of chocolate hobnobs in the top of the bag. Usually half eaten by the time I got home as well, by the way. So I sort of made sure that I cleaned out my cupboards of all the sort of temptation items and things I no longer wanted to eat. So there was a sort of day one of a fresh start, and then the weekly shopping just changed. I made sure that I blocked out time in my diary to prepare meals or to do exercise. And actually in the book, I sort of hint at this, but that obviously in the job I was doing, that was very difficult because there was a lot of demands on my time. So there needed to be a conversation with my team where essentially I said, look, I think you will get more out of me if you can bear me not to be around as much as I currently am. I need a little bit of exercise time and I need a little bit of time in the evening to go and cook food rather than buy food on the run. And they found that very difficult to start with. But after a couple of months, they kind of said, we can't believe this guy is who he used to be. He's much calmer, he's more productive, he's more focused in meetings. And they're kind of obvious points, aren't they? If you're feeling healthier, you're sleeping better, you're eating better, of course your demeanor is going to be calmer and more reflective. But you need to I needed to consciously map out those deficiencies, those bad habits, so that I could break them. So I think the hardest thing is to break the negative habits, and that took a bit of time. And then for me, I used to sort of bank positive habits. So I would always, I would always have a rule that would say bathroom, scales, trainers. Right. And I knew that when I did the morning weigh-in, the next thing I did would be to put my trainers on, because that was much more likely that I'd go out for what started with getting my morning steps up to got a run in or went out on the bike or went to the gym, and the more you can sort of stack those habits, they call it habit stacking, the more productive that is. And I think that's why people in lockdown, that's been particularly difficult for people, because a lot of people have almost sort of their daily routines that are habits that they wouldn't identify as habits, but they are. And of course, that's now been thrown by the lockdown. So if you've got a 10,000 step a day target, a lot of people, if they were commuting, would have got 3,000 or 4,000 of those steps on the way to the station. They've not replaced those 4,000 step opportunities with something else, and that is the difficulty. I think that as a nation we found quite hard in the first few weeks of lockdown.
Yeah, absolutely. But prior to creating new habits, would you say that because we've been brainwashed with so much advertising, marketing, happy meals, happy hour, eat a little bit often, breakfast is the most important meal of the day, have a balanced diet. I mean, there's so much misinformation out there, even guidelines that are wrong. you think a good start place for many people, because they might not have access to personal trainers or they might not have access to dietitians, is a good place to start to pick one of those brilliant books out there, a Seams Diet, your book, or Fixing Dad, or just find one, browse and find one that you like, and maybe just get a bit of knowledge first, because how do they know which habits to unbreak and which ones to adopt without a little bit of saying, hang on, there's an alternative way to all of these guidelines?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always sort of, because of my previous profession, I always think is where's the public policy failure? And the public policy failure is clear to me. The people that have gone down this road and sorted themselves out, reversed their conditions, got healthy, changed their lives, they've had to do it on their own. They've had to sort of work their way around the system, find the information themselves, rather than being able to go to their GP or a bit of the NHS and be easily signposted around to the information. And the great news is we have got people now that have people like Asim, who wrote the Piopi Diet, or Michael Mosley and others, who can help start that journey. And so there's very readable literature out there. You've written your own book as well, Steve, which is also should be on people's reading list. So it's a good starting point. And for me, that was particularly important because obviously I had to consciously break the evidence-based advice of the government, which when you're an MP, even if you're an opposition MP, as I was, that's not an easy thing to do, and it's a risky thing to do. But having read the science and read the literature, I realised that for me it was the right thing to do. So yes, start by reading a book, or getting a few books. There's plenty out there, and then start day by day. You can't do it overnight. Just take tiny little steps to a changed life is how I'd say do it. And what I found was, if I could bank a win, when I lost £1 or when I hit what was originally a 5,000 step target, which sounds ridiculous now, that soon got to a 7,000 step target and then 10. You go to bed and you've done your steps target. You can do it on you've got an iPhone or any phone. You can get an app that measures it. It doesn't have to be accurate. Exactly, precisely accurate. It's just as long as it gives you a general position. That's a great feeling.
Yeah.
And banking daily wins really is a way of embedding good behaviour. I think that's what really works.
And that's moving into that habit bit, isn't it? Because you have to keep repeating something to obviously make it habit forming. And it could be different things for different people, couldn't it? Some people, people say to me, should I always jump on the scales? I went, well, that depends on your personality. I personally can't manage anything that I can't measure. So, I'm religious about my keto measuring or jumping on scales because that's my personality. But others, you don't have to jump on the scales. It could be the tape measure around the waist. It could be the number of steps you're doing. It could be the fact that you used to snack every single day, 11s and 3s, but now you're going, to now just 3 meals a day. Or it might be that you weren't snacking. You've read the bit that we all talk about, well, breakfast isn't the most important meal of the day, and you've stopped that. But you've got to keep doing it repeatedly to then make it habit forming.
Yeah, that's kind of to say that quote that you read out from the book. It's a description of Aristotle, actually. I mean, Aristotle I've described as the first ever self-help guru.
Agreed. Yeah.
And the idea is, you are what you repeatedly do. Mm-hmm. If you do 10,000 steps a day, you are someone who has an active walking lifestyle. If you're someone who weighs himself every day, you're someone who manages their weight. You're in, you can. It actually it changes who you are. The internal narrative within yourself. I used to describe myself in ironic terms. Because I'd always get home and collapse on the sofa. I would always describe myself as the hardest working, laziest person I've ever met. Because I was working junior doctor hours, doing crazy meetings under massive pressure, but I was really overweight and slothful. And so I'd got this kind of contradictory sort of view of myself, which was, I'm tired all the time. I'm exhausted. I can't get up these stairs. I can barely lift anything. My strength is depleted. I must be lazy. And yet I had a job that clearly required a high level of motivation and dedication. Of course, what I now realize was what I was a sugar addict with 3-hour spikes and troughs. And I was that for 25 years and I didn't register it. And when I could codify what I was, address that condition using new habits to get me off sugar, lo and behold, I was still motivated. I was still doing long hours. I was still under stress, but I started jogging upstairs rather than crawling upstairs, and I didn't fall asleep in mid-afternoon meetings. And so there's a journey you can take with these little rules that are really important, I think.
And it's just picking those for yourself, isn't it? What measurements are you going to use, or what moments of success are you going to celebrate? And then make those little changes. So you were drinking Coke, you were eating Hobnob biscuits.
Yeah.
They've all gone. What's the good habits for food for yourself now?
Oh, for me, so I will. I try and have a daily eating window. I mean, it's often sort of in lockdown. That's a little bit hit and miss now. But if I can have an 8-hour eating window, that works for me. If I can sort of eat later in the day and try and eat an early tea, I think that just is my sort of daily rhythm now. I mean, I can definitely, say I'm sugar free. The nearest thing I get to confectionery is very, very dark chocolate, at least 80% cocoa solids or even higher. And even then, I'll only have a little bit. I've not eaten sweets or pop for 2.5 years, and I'll never go back to that. So a good habit, a good daily habit for me would be, late breakfast, probably an omelette with some spinach or mushrooms. Daily weigh in just to make sure I'm okay. Although these days that's more just to sort of keep within a range. Some form of what I would call zone 2 physical activity most days. Zone 2 is where if you're on a treadmill, you'd be a little bit breathless, but able to hold a conversation if pushed. So you're not overstressing yourself, but you're just getting your heart beating to about 65-70% of its maximum, and you're just being active. And I could do that with a light jog or a run out on the bike, or even a brisk walk if I'm with friends and family who aren't really into jogging. And that just keeps you focused, I think. And trying to just do that regularly every day. It's funny in the spring now, because you can sort of recalibrate the rules to where you sit. So since I was on lockdown, I'm fortunate that I've got a life where I can do Zoom conference calls or great events like this. For the first couple of weeks of lockdown, I found myself that I was literally sitting in front of a computer screen for 4 or 5 hours a day without getting out of the chair. It was even worse than the old job. So I thought, okay, I need to. I'm not going to be able to stop doing some of these online meetings, but every hour I can make sure that I move around. So I did this crazy little routine, which is still working for me, where I got an old phone. Every hour, I set the alarm to go off to play a track from the Bob Marley Exodus album. And when that trigger alarm goes off, that's my cue to do 10 press ups, 10 star jumps, and 10 sit ups. And it's not going to get you super healthy, but it's just going to get you moving, get your body moving, get your heart beating a little bit, keep your metabolism ticking over. And of course, if you've got a little slot, you don't just do 10, you do 40 or 50 star jumps, or you do 15 press ups, or you throw in some side planks, or you walk out into the garden and get the sun on your skin. And so that is my new lockdown habit that works for me. It's quirky, which is probably why it sticks in the mind. And I've thought it through because it's addressing a new problem created by lockdown. And I think that's where the nation has been as well. Everyone has been trying to do these little changes to their life. So I've got a friend who'd like to go out on his bike, but obviously it's not as easy to go out now. So he's now got himself one of those little, do they call them TAC-X or tax, where he kind of, he'll sit on his bike in his living room.
Yeah, the two.
And he'll end up doing phone calls whilst sort of slowly pedaling on this bike, which he's absolutely loving. Everyone's just got to sort of find their own little routine for the context in which they find themselves on lockdown.
You probably find, don't you, that actually those of us that got super big and super fat, we are the sort of people that get into habits. So therefore, what you've got to do, isn't it, is you've got to replace as many as you can that are bad habits and put them to good habits. You know, I was like you. I was up early every morning, work, running the companies, get home, collapse on the sofa every evening. And then would beat myself up going, well, that's so out of character, but you just couldn't do it. And then during that sort of 3 years when I went from super fat to reasonably healthy, it was just the more habits you could break. But because you're a habit type person, then you've got to replace them with other things. So before, and I'm not saying I don't drink anymore because I still drink, but if I could push that window back, so rather than it be 6 o'clock when I get home straight going for the wine, I go, right, why am I having that glass of wine? Let's do something different. And same as you, let's do 20 press-ups and just see if that desire to have that first glass of wine goes away. And then later on, you go, well, it's 8 o'clock. Okay, well, then we'll have the wine then. But the point is, if you are really a habitual type person, then that's one of the reasons we put on a load of weight. That's why we then get addicted. And in fact, great book by Dr. Robert Lustig, about habit forming and addiction and dopamine in the brain and how the way it all works. And I recommend that to anybody that's got a bad habit. It's called Hacking the American Mind. Could be hacking any mind, to be quite honest. But we become habit forming. What we've got to do is stop beating yourself up for having a habit, because that's just the way you're made up. Just try and swap some of them out for good ones, and eventually you just lose those others. And the other thing I was going to ask you about was, do you find your taste buds have changed now that you've kicked the sugar?
Completely, yeah. They're what I found, I think when you have ultra processed food in general, the taste you are more extreme, or those products have gotten such extreme tastes. It almost like it fuses out your taste buds. So when you come off sugar and ultra processed food, over time you can feel more subtle tastes from more foodstuffs. So different chocolate tastes different. Or you can taste different types of coffee, or the meat you eat tastes different, and that's great for me because you get to really appreciate eating in the moment, which is another thing I realised was a very bad habit for me, which is subconscious eating. The thing you realise about big people and negative habits, they're very determined people. That you can work very hard at embedding a negative habit, and it's only when you realise that habits are negative as well as positive, and that you actually take time to identify those negative habits. Can you sort of take measures to break them? And being able to savour food in a different way is a really good way of embedded good eating behaviour, good eating habits. I think appreciating the food on your plate. The second you put it in your mouth, just having a little conversation with yourself about what that taste feels like, and how that's a different taste to how you used to sort of take your food in, which for me would be, I'd never give it time to even to be in my mouth so that I could taste it.
Well, we wouldn't, because you were addicted to sugar, so it would be a case of stuffing it in as quickly as you can, because you've got addiction, that energy rush. And it's gone in seconds, hasn't it? Whereas as soon as you come off those carbs, we act a bit more like the French. We take our time with our food, you savour it, you enjoy it more, because you're taking it in slower, you tend to eat less anyway, and you just feel more satisfied.
You do. It's a gift, really. It's a genuine blessing. It's a little bit harder with physical exercise, I think, to do habits, because obviously your overwhelming voice in when you first start physical exercise is, oh no, I've really got to do another press up. Have I really got to do? I can't do it. I'm going to fail at this. I really don't want to do it. Whereas now you try to say to yourself, this is going to be great. Bob Marley is playing on the phone. That's your cue. You're going to really enjoy that first press up. And then when you go into the press up, you say, this is great. This is like, you've done another little habit. And then when you come out of the press up, you think, right, one more press up on the way to good health, right? That's a very conscious, hard conversation. It's almost an inauthentic conversation that you need to try and embed a habit. But yeah, and people who've been through rapid weight loss and now do exercise will probably get it. But it's very hard to describe to people about how you get that inner voice to align with the habit. But there are rewards. That's how you really embed a habit. If you sort of think about the inner voice.
And of course, if somebody's sitting there today listening to us that is where you were and where I was, we're not looking down on anybody because we were there. It's a hormonal problem. It's an advertising problem. It's a brainwashing problem. We've all been there. Well, not everybody, but you and I were there. And if they're frightened about the thing about exercise, I say don't even think about that to start off with, because that's the small portion. 80% of getting your health back in control is in the kitchen. And then all the rest, the exercise, the sunshine, the environment, the lifestyle, all those, they'll come naturally because all of a sudden, once you lose some weight, you've got more energy. The thought to me, for a lot of people, when I speak to them, they go, the thought of having to go even walking. My dad said, I'm not going for a walk. I haven't got the energy. He said, okay, let's fix the food first, to get your weight down, and then the energy comes, and you'll find yourself bouncing around the walls if you don't go outside.
It's amazing how you find that. I mean, and in fact, you maybe even consciously, you do. If you're just starting, you don't have to say I need to do exercise because it's actually moving from being completely sedentary to a little bit active, where there's a huge tangible gain for people. And that kind of comes naturally. So, if you can change your nutrition and you're not using all your emotional bandwidth to find your next sugar fix, which is how I now see what I was doing. You just end up with a little bit more of a spring in your step, and you kind of naturally you just walk around a bit more, and then you can start to think more consciously about, can I set myself some targets here? How do I move this on? And that's the real joy. But you're right about. The hardest thing is fear of failure. I think when you're in the first few days, because people judge you all the time when you're overweight. People would say, he's either a thug or he's naturally lazy or, he's greedy. These terms are very, very loaded. And very often none of that is true about the people that are overweight. The system is stacked against them. If I've had this discussion with Piers Morgan when I've been on TV, the idea that it's solely down to personal discipline that you can get to the point from being obese to healthy. Yes, of course, your personal decisions have got to be at the heart of that. But the system really is stacked against people. The things that people are told they can eat in moderation when really they shouldn't be touching it. The choices they have in the food aisles, the language that people use to describe what you've got to do to get healthy. The idea that a can of Coke is good for you when you've done your exercise. I look at it now. It's ridiculous, isn't it? It's so far off what the real, what you really have to do is. That no wonder people, don't achieve their goals. It does help.
And for people to say, well, it's your fault, you're lazy. Well, you get lazy because you get big. It's not the other way around. It's not that you probably were lazy to start off with. We were all teenagers and fit and healthy. And then bit by bit, because we were eating the wrong stuff, we got lazy because of the food we were eating, not the other way around. So to become energetic, you've got to lose the weight in the first place. And it is difficult. And I don't blame anybody that's overweight. We've both been there. It's because those guidelines are wrong. And my last thing, I'm going to ask one political one before we go and see what loads of questions coming in for you. As we now know, this is wrong. And I even heard that Matt Hancock once went on a low-carb diet and lost some weight. So with all that happening, why on earth have we still got these crazy guidelines? Why won't the government do anything about it?
Well, I think that citadel has nearly been breached because there are just hundreds of thousands of people that are consciously choosing to ignore government advice. and but the Public Health England experts would say they can only go off evidence that nutritional science yields. But of course, you then look at this thing called nutritional science, and you realise that nearly every study involving foodstuffs is funded by the food production industry. That even if the leadership of those industries is virtuous, institutionally they have a vested interest to maintain the status quo, because there's half a dozen conglomerates that give us all these ultra processed foods, and the consequences of realizing that what they're feeding us is making us chronically unhealthy is just too much.
Yeah, you wrote it on page 10 in your book. You put, but the health journey for me has also been politically instructive. There's a golden rule of politics. The more harm an industry inflicts, the greater the lobbying spend. And that's what people are up against, isn't it? I heard the other day that Just Eat, which is that little middleman that sits between home deliveries and all the fast food, little chip shops, kebab shops, which is probably delivering food, the wrong food at the wrong time of day, is now a FTSE 100 company. It's just a little man with a little bit of software, and that's been a bit derogatory. But they've got one of the biggest lobbying departments in the UK, because they know at some point, the shit's going to hit the fan, and people are going to go, hang on, you're just delivering masses of sugar late at night.
I'll tell you, I'll come on that in a minute. But when it comes to lobby power, and thank you for mentioning that in the book. There's an amazing academic on the east coast of America called Dr. Marion Nestle, who was actually followed by investigators working for Coca-Cola because her work was so threatening to the sugar industry that they needed to hear every word she uttered in any public meeting in order to try and catch her out. And Marion Nestle told me, she's an octogenarian, she's a veteran of this debate. She told me that Coca-Cola had spent $100 million globally to challenge policies and regulations that would reduce refined sugar in our diets, whether it be the sugar levy in the UK or restrictions on advertising in places like Chile, which has done quite a lot to sort of reduce sugar intake. Now that is power, is it? $100 million to lobby in favour of something that is proven to be bad for you. And then you look at Just Eat. The interesting thing about these intermediary tech platforms, that if you're being fair to them, it's clever tech that's proving logistics right. Where they have market power is, yes, they're currently allowing very unhealthy foods to be delivered to us late at night. And believe me, 3 years ago, I was getting come back to us emails from Domino's Pizza for about a year, and I would eat a lot of Domino's pizzas delivered late at night. Where they could be very advantageous in the years ahead. Imagine if they were to say to their distribution networks, their suppliers, or the suppliers that use them, you've got to up your standards. We want you to use olive oil. We want you to offer salads. We want you to, give people the sort of full composition of all the things that you put in the food. We don't want you to add sugar unless you let people know you're adding sugar. They could raise standards at scale were they to do that. And that's a challenge to, if you're Uber Eats, if you're Deliveroo, if you're Just Eat, there's a potential for them to make significant improvements to Britain's millions of takeaways, which has been a revolution in the way we consume food in the last couple of decades.
Well, I adore your optimism, but I think the only thing that will change if us as consumers change what it is we want to eat. So if we start demanding that, then maybe they will change their ways. And
well, there's a bit of a nudge there. Yeah, well, that's what we're doing that's what you and I are doing, Steve, isn't it? I mean, but government could play a role here. The government could nudge in the right direction. And for the first time, this is a tech-enabled opportunity to improve the quality of the food we eat external to our homes. And So if I was a government minister and I'd be thinking, what's got to change post-lockdown, uh, all credit to Matt Hancock. It looks like capacity in the NHS has been protected with the emergency measures that have been made. The lessons learned from this will be how do we have a resilient health sector? Well, the obvious next change of policy would be we've got to help the nation lose weight. What can we do? Well, let's have a look at how Public Health England are organised and the evidence base which they tell us how to eat. How can we do social prescribing to try and get people, instead of going to their GP, being immediately medicated, how do we get them leading more active lives? How can we plug people into good nutrition? What has the private sector got to do to help this? Can Coca-Cola still get away with selling a can of pop that breaches the recommended daily allowance for adult intake of refined sugar in a single can, knowing that a third of our kids are leaving primary school either overweight or obese? I think not. And so some of these previously hard to reach policy measures that ministers, for a minister to take on Coca-Cola, especially the absolute century-old powerful brand that is full fat Coke, as we call it, would have been unheard of. Well, post the virus, with the need for people to lose weight, more central to policy making, some of these things are possible, aren't they? I think, and you've got to be an optimist when you've been in politics, I think.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right. And our good friend, I know he was very central to helping. Well, the book you read, The Poppy Diet, from Asim Malhotra. It was nice to see last night, BBC, main news, 9 o'clock. They gave him 5 minutes of airtime, very much around chronic disease and being overweight and the effect that's having, and what we need to do to recover from it. And it's nice because normally the outspoken ones don't get listened to on the news.
It's very important because you think, he in many senses, Asim is a sort of pioneer. Some people vilified him for challenging those orthodoxies. When I remember doing a sort of 3 or 4 minute piece for a Radio 4 program just on my own weight loss journey, and Public Health England refused to be interviewed by me because I was taking a piece from Asim as well, which they later apologised for. But that's pretty unheard of, isn't it? And so all credit to him and the team of people that want to make the nation healthy. They're driven by the need to make people well. It's the most fundamental motivation or force in medicine. And to break some of those orthodoxies is really hard for people sometimes.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into politics too much, but if you had been running the health service, I think Matt's done absolutely brilliantly, but I would be absolutely convinced we'd be looking at prevention rather than cure. I think we'd be looking at how we move it from the National Hospital Service to what is a National Health Service. And those 5 years at med school for all our doctors that don't even include 1 day on nutrition, which we know that if food is the thing that is driving most chronic illness in the UK and our food choices, then surely a good chunk of education for doctors should be not just on diagnosing and drugs, but on how we prevent. If you'd have been running it, I'd be super confident that we could save the NHS an absolute fortune if we could just stop people getting diabetic in the first place.
Yeah, again, we talked about this before, but if you look at the research out of Newcastle University or Verta Health in the States, it suggests that at least half of current type 2 diabetics could reverse the condition, kick their meds. We're spending 10% of the NHS budget on treating type 2 diabetes alone, before you look at all the other metabolic syndrome illnesses. That's nearly £10 billion a year. And yet probably 2 million type 2 diabetics could get off their meds. I think we're amputating 140 feet and toes a week because of diabetic related conditions. You could halve that overnight. And why Asim was on national news last night, of course, what we know is we're looking at the COVID data where people are being treated in hospital and on ventilators tend to be suffering from metabolic syndrome illnesses, and obesity is one of those things. What we know is that you can reverse your condition very quickly. I think I got my blood sugars in order in a couple of months. So if people started to change their nutrition today, they're literally increasing their resilience to all sorts of other, surviving viral attacks. And you can't say that's just the answer. And I don't want to say that will mean that everyone is well. But it's never too early to start, and I could hear the urgency in Asim's voice when he did that interview, and I could see why he's passionate about making sure people get this message.
I've just got an idea. When COVID's gone, let's leave those Nightingale hospitals up at Excel, at the NEC and places like that. I'll put some funds up, you run the programme. Let's get anybody that's diabetic that wants to get off the meds, and let's all go and stay in a Nightingale hospital for 4 weeks, and let's see how many we can reverse.
I honestly think we could do that. I mean, I would look if I can. I feel like that post politics. I mean, there's a few things I'm doing now, but I still, if I've got a sense of mission, it's giving millions of type 2 diabetics the joy of their middle years back. Feeling as great as I do when I wake up in the morning, enjoying their days, feeling more cognitively enhanced, just enjoying the company of others and being more chilled out. I mean, we can do it. And, government's got to play its role in that, but, civic society has as well. And people of good heart and good spirit can do it.
We have 4 minutes till 11 o'clock. At 11 o'clock, there's a 1 minute silence for the NHS. So we've got 2 choices. We'll either quickly get some questions and then say goodbye, but this is so fascinating. Are you happy to stay around for another 10, 15 minutes?
Yes, although I'm supposed to be on another meeting. Sorry, mate.
Okay, no, let's quickly do some questions then. Call it to a close, and can we get you back on? Because we could talk
get
forever.
Me back on. I'd love to, Steve. Yeah, I'd love to, yeah.
So, Jack, keep waving at me when we get close to 11 o'clock. Let's just go to... let's go and... Oh, crikey, so many questions. Daniela says, we can't blame the government for everything. We have to take the responsibility for ourselves. You're right, we do to a certain extent, but in all the things we've mentioned, I've been there, Tom's been there, and, we are marketed a load of things that we shouldn't be eating. The message needs, as Sheila says, the message needs to come from people outside of government. Well, that's a good job you're outside of government now then. We need to keep pushing this message. There's some great statements. At the end of the day, it is power, profit, control. We need to promote truth, freedom and health. Isn't that a lovely one, Tom? Get away from power, profit, control and promote freedom and health. Dev Patel said, it's hard to convince people to believe what good doctors say as the mainstream advice conflicts everything. All GPs give their best advice and just keep advice from GPs on unnecessary pills and ops. Yeah, that's a really good point. Do you think the mismatch between the UK-US food guidelines and, say, the POPI diet is a result of corruption or incompetence?
Both, but I think it's big. I think it's big corporate lobbying. I really do.
Go with that. I haven't seen how big some of these lobbying departments are. My son's waving at me. Son, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm going to put a timer on and we'll start.
You're going to put a timer on. Okay. We must pay our respects to the NAC in a moment. There's no money for big pharma in supplying vitamins. That's a really good point, which we've talked a lot about the last couple of days. We can't have a vaccine for a constantly mutating virus. It's utterly impossible. It's a good point by one of our people. There's hundreds of people putting comments in. Andrew Hunt says, nice, Tom. I also do this. 25 press-ups, 30-second plank, and indoor activities. Right, we've got 11 seconds. Tom, you've been absolutely...
And the planks are hardest. Thanks for having me on, Steve. I'll come back.
Love you, man. Take care. God bless.
All the best.
Thank you. That was the brilliant Tom Watson. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow.
Food facts.
Hey?
We've got food facts and stuff to do.
Oh, we've got more to do. Okay, food facts. Right. Yes, good point, Jack. Wasn't Tom absolutely brilliant there? It's nice he's agreed to come back on. Again, I could talk to that man all day long. He really is a superstar. His book, by the way, is a truly, truly inspirational read. Just so honest. It's just a lovely book to read. And maybe you're overweight and you're thinking about losing weight, but you haven't yet committed. This would be a great, great first read. Now, today's food fact. I thought I'd throw something up a bit controversial because we're all told to eat 5 fruit and veg a day. And one of the first things that people reach for is an orange. Because why? Well, it's full of something called vitamin C. No doubt about that. It has vitamin C in it. However, the amount of vitamin C in an orange is the same. Well, let me put it another way. A yellow bell pepper has 5 times more. The problem with the orange, and I'm not saying nobody should eat oranges, but if you are overweight, trying to lose weight, if you're obese or diabetic, then the amount of sugar in an orange is really, really, really high indeed. And even worse than having maybe an orange to eat is maybe orange juices where they take and squash it, you get all the sugar, none of the fibre. At least when you eat the orange, you've got the benefit of the fibre, and the fibre does help us to not absorb so much of that sugar. But my point is this, even fruit, and this is why you need to learn about the different types of fruit. Certain fruits, if you're trying to lose weight, you should avoid, and one of those would be an orange. You're better off having a bell pepper or taking vitamins because you don't, I mean, if you had, say, 4 oranges, 60 grams of sugar. Yes, the fibre stops you absorbing all of that, but it's still a lot of sugar. Maybe think about other fruits. Now, the blueberries, the blackberries, the strawberries, the raspberries, they have very little sugar, and the sugar they have in them isn't fructose at all. It's a different type of sugar that actually, believe it or not, has benefits to our teeth as opposed to the fructose and the glucose that cause cavities. So while there are some nutritional benefits of having an orange, if in any way at all you're metabolically challenged, diabetes, high blood pressure, Alzheimer's, any of the sort of things associated with metabolic syndrome, then I would be giving the orange a wide berth till you get your health under control. Thank you to everybody who's watched today. An absolute massive thank you to Tom Watson for being an absolute brilliant guest. I'm sorry we had to cut Tom off short, and sorry we didn't get to everybody's questions today, but it was so important for us to do that 1 minute of silence for our absolute brilliant NHS. And while at times you might think when I say it's the National Hospital Service and not the National Health Service, while at times you hear me moaning about doctors don't get educated on nutrition, it's the system that's wrong because the people are utterly brilliant. Till tomorrow, stay safe and have a great day.
When you have to go without everyday things, food, hot water, heating, that's really, it's a really hard way to have to live, really. And that's devastating for most people. Start to make a lot of mistakes at work, and they suggest that I see a doctor who diagnosed me with, at that time, work-related stress.
I unfortunately took 2 TIA strokes. I did spend a time in hospital to come out to discover that I couldn't go back to my work.
Worked all my life, army, sales, when my health deteriorated with a heart condition. Then my married life deteriorated as well.
After a period of time, they decided it wouldn't be viable for me to return to that kind of work because I couldn't handle the pressure of it, so it led me into the benefit system.
We just started to struggle. Things started to get quite sort of dramatic, and things were just starting to get on top of me because I just wasn't doing what I should have been doing as a mother.
I do have a 10-year-old daughter as well, so I do try and provide for her as well, which makes it more difficult, but it's a case of trying to budget or having to go without. think if the food bank had not been there to keep me going, I don't think I'll be here today.
No, I'm not needing the food bank anymore, but I'm glad it was there when I needed the help.
To find out that there is places there that can help you with food and other things, it's an amazing thing to have put in front of you.